Hey guys, welcome to the rollout. I'm Lindsay Rousseau.
And I am Genevieve Marie.
Right. We are, as always, powered by Vorpal Board today. So the layout that you see here is brought to you by Vorpal Board. Always happy to have them give us this amazing platform to stream from. Yeah, we've got an amazing show today, but let's dive into the news.
Yes, let us do the news. All right, so video gamers, some exciting news today about the PlayStation 5 that launches this November. We have a price tag on that console now. So it is starting at $399 for the PS5 digital edition and $499 for the PS5 with the Ultra HD Blu-ray disc drive.
Can I get paid that instead of my unemployment check? Is that
just like I still need my unemployment. So the PlayStation, I'm actually just gonna go back to my parents and be like, Mom, what I want for Christmas is, I'm just gonna go to a mall Santa.
There are no mall Santas, Genevieve. The virtual mall Santa.
Just like write a note. Anyway, the PlayStation 5 is going to be backwards compatible, which is a feature that is sorely missed by those in the PlayStation community, including myself. So all of those fun PlayStation games that have come out like in the past couple of months, you can still play it on the PS5 when it comes out this November. The featured Sony game titles that will be available for the PS5 include my personal favorite, Horizon Forbidden West, Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales, which is going to be...
Oh my God, you guys, it's going to be so good.
I know.
Anything else, but it's going to be epic.
Gran Turismo 7, Demon Soul, and there are others, but y'all can go to the internet for that. Next up, we have something from Pathfinder, which is exciting. They're dropping a lot of stuff this year, a lot of news, a lot of stuff that's coming in 2021. So Pathfinder announces a new non-Western magic school adventure path called The Strength of Thousands. Ooh. It takes place in the heart of the the Wangi Expanse Pathfinder's African-inspired fantasy region. This adventure is a take on the traditional magical school story that will guide characters from level 1 to level 20. You will start out as students, and then players must become teachers in order to become responsible for the fate of their school.
Oh my God, this is, okay, so anyone hasn't been watching our 6-part miniseries, Wizards of Ukador, this is totally it.
It's like Harry Potter meets Pathfinder meets... It's going to be great. Yeah. Interestingly enough, your characters do not have to be traditional spell casting classes to play this path. And that is going to be really cool because all classes will be given some level of spellcasting abilities to get them through the game. But fun fact, if you choose to be a traditional spellcaster class, you will have a higher leg up in magic than others that are not traditional spellcasters. So that is my news. Lindsay, what do you got?
All right. So Wizards of the Coast, we mentioned this a couple weeks ago, but it is happening this weekend. Their D&D celebration is happening this weekend. They are celebrating the release of Icewind Dale, Rim of the Frost Maidens. So like this whole weekend is going to be all Icewind Dale themed virtual play sessions. So they're looking to make it the biggest tabletop role-playing game event ever. We'll see. But I'm still excited. But the thing that actually I'm really excited about this weekend is that they are going to be previewing some of the content from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which, of course, as many of you are aware, is the upcoming book that's going to have rule expansions, new subclasses, a lot more 5th edition content. So tune in this weekend for Wizard Stream to see some of the new things that are coming. And you can always, I think there's still some seats available to sign up for some of the games that they're hosting. And then for Warhammer fans, so the Games Workshop has the new Arena Mortis for Warhammer Underworlds. So it's an upcoming expansion for Warhammer Underworlds, and it's going to basically change kind of some of the gameplay. So it's a fast-paced game for 3 to 6 players. So you're going to have strategies and everything to work together in order to be successful. And you can definitely check out online, look it up. They've got some previews of what just the new rule set is going to look like. But the minis and some of the layouts that they have for it look really interesting. So yeah, that's all we got for the news today. Let's dive into our amazing guests that we have.
Yes, everybody, please. Oh my gosh, sorry. Everybody, please welcome Hunter Smith and Keythe Farley. They are our guests today, and they are both in the acting realm, performance, and they are here to discuss today's topic, which is I'm a thief, but why?
And yeah, so sorry, had to refresh there. But yeah, we have, I don't know if you gave Hunter a bio, but we have Keythe Farley, who is an amazing voice actor, director, coach. He's also a playwright. For all you video gamers out there, he was Thing Krios in Mass Effect 2. He was Kellogg in Fallout 4. And one of my personal things, when I found out this about you, Keythe, when I first took a class with you, he is the co-author of Bat Boy the Musical, the off-Broadway musical, which I love. So for all you thespians out there, that is Keythe.
We're going to keep both of you entertained this afternoon.
Yes, and Hunter is a trained movement actor. He he does stunts, movement. He does a lot of why am I? It's like falling right out of my head. Motion capture. Thank you. I'm like, the word is like right on the tip of my brain. Motion capture work. He also, y'all know who Steve Huff is. He works closely with Steve Huff from time to time. And he is just an absolute wonderful person. Like I said, he is probably the funniest person I have ever encountered in my life, which now you have to prove it. So anyway, no pressure. What we're going to talk about today is basically, you make your characters, for D&D and, for other RPGs, and you have your race, you have your class, but maybe you don't exactly know how to play those characters. Maybe you're having a hard time pinning down motivation for your character. Say you're a thief, but you don't really know why you steal or why you need to, why you have the compulsion to have this job. And
kind of with your alignments as well. It's like, okay, we've got law and good and chaotic and evil. What does that really mean? And one of the first things that they'll teach you in any acting class is even if you're playing an evil character, you don't think you're evil. So what is it? What are those choices that led you to where you are now to be doing the things that you're doing?
Right. So I guess let's start off with a baseline question of what is the first thing you guys do to start to build a character? Say you're given the script / you're given your character sheet. What is the first step that you guys take to actually start fleshing out your character that you've been given? Do you do journaling? Do you?
What is your motivation? Hunter, you're muted. Hunter, we can't hear you. Can you hear us?
Great.
Keythe,
He's
feel
just
free
being
to jump
funny.
in then.
He's just being funny.
He's being funny. Yeah. Well, and because Keythe, you teach acting as well. That's one of your big things. And obviously as a playwright, you've developed a lot of characters in your day. So, and then as an actor, you're only given just specs and go.
Right. Well, it depends on whether you have an image for the character. Been teaching a lot this year, kind of going back to the basics of which is sort of based on an author of playwriting from back in the 60s and 70s called Lajos Egri. His book on dramatic writing talks a lot about character creation. And he has some really interesting ideas about it. But to break it down really simply, it's about physiology, sociology, and psychology. So we think about what does a character look like physically, and you're going to, because an orc is much physically different than an elf, right? I mean, we've got very different ideas there. So that's going to be, how does the character move? I always thinking as a voice actor, and I'm sure Hunter can jump in on this from a performance aspect, about how does an elf move? How does an elf speak compared to how does an orc speak? And then we talk about the sociology. Where do they fit into the class structure? Is this someone who is a king or a prince or a cop or a baker or someone who shovels shit behind horses? They're all going to speak differently and have a different approach to the world. And then we talk about the psychology of the character. Is this someone who's well-adjusted? Is it someone who, and we start getting into motivations there. You talk about what the character needs, what the character wants. Is this character well-adjusted? Do they feel a need to prove themselves? Are they feeling constantly put down? Are they humble? Are they quiet? Are they shy? Are they psychopathic? There's a lot to dig into, and you can get really granular with just those three different classes of physiology, sociology, and psychology. And that can give you a lot in terms of how you play a character.
Yeah. And that's so true. Hunter, are you back? Maybe? Yes? Try refreshing your browser, maybe?
I want to turn the volume up.
Sorry, guys. Hunter, yeah, there you go. Okay. Yeah, and with the great thing about, with D&D is that you and other, RPGs is that you are the one creating that character. So literally your imagination is endless. That's the only thing that's constraining you. It's like, okay, you want to create this type of character. So what are those choices you're going to make for yourself to decide, as opposed to, something being given to you, as in, you are given this character and you're falling into their shoes, being able to create that. So, Keythe, for like maybe with playwriting, for when you were, you were a character and say you have this character in a show, are you the type of person that like wants to create a deep backstory for that character that goes beyond maybe what was actually in the script itself?
Not really. I tend to think of it in terms of dramatic structure in the way characters interact with each other in the present moment. But it never hurts to think about motivation and backstory. I mean, in Bat Boy, for an example, the backstory is built into the show. We see what motivates the characters to behave the way that they did by saving that information until the very end. And then when we reveal it, it sort of goes back and explains everything that you've seen happen before. So as long as it's within the 100 pages or so of the script, I think that's great. Nothing against a lot of folks really gain a lot from doing rich research and backstories, and it helps them live into the character. So my approach may not be your approach, but general things about magicians and orcs and sorcerers and paladins and what they're generally like, just by the fact that the lore exists.
Right. Are we still having? Are you back?
I don't know. Am I?
Yes, you're back. Okay, great. All right, Hunter.
I'm gonna mute myself now.
No.
I love what you were saying.
And yeah, guys,
embodying the performer. One of the things that we talk about for motion capture work is taking how character moves and putting it down into endomorphic, mesomorphic, and ectomorphic. Endomorphic being the heavier, the orcs, the giants, the warlords and whatnot. Mesomorphic being a more toned up hero or any kind of normal human. And then as you move into more ectomorphic, it gets the elves. But elves have a thing that they talk about. Carrie Teal and Nick Wolf described it as tiger bottom, eagle top. And so really trying to get into a breath pattern that lets you solidify into the step of the character to take on embodying it, as you said. As far as creating a backstory, I think like an individual scene worker, when you get blasted with a couple pages, it's excellent to just develop the relationships and about how you're seen in society by what you do or who you are or what you're known for. And then as well as on your side, the relationships of how you see the rest of the world. That's that maladjusted part you were talking about. If everyone has a general disposition to be a friend or be a helpful entity to you, and you want to treat them as well as such, then you are mostly like everyone else in the world. If you see everyone else as a target or a means to an end, then you immediately set yourself into a different kind of mindset, the more villainous mindset. But as a way of justifying backstory, you always tie it to relationships and emotional connections that make it justified. As far as creating a backstory for D&D, I think just having an inciting incident that made you choose to join these adventures, to go on this path of, I'm going to fight people. I'm going to put my life on the line, leave my home, leave my folk hero-ness, leave my safety in seclusion or in crime, and go out and really put myself to the test.
Yeah, because most of the time it's just you're all in a tavern and you meet each other, and now you're gonna go fight things.
Right.
And it's
right. Is this all you've ever wanted to do for the entirety of your life, or when did this happen?
Right. Yeah.
This is a really point when you're talking about relationships. Is and any coach or director will tell you, like, relationships are key. So, you are, not all games are the same, but you are working with a team, with a party, and maybe you don't like everyone in that party, but if you set yourself up as the character who's just like, well, I hate everybody, that might not be the most interesting scenario, and you might find yourself acting into a wall, literally, like you can't progress the story anymore, you can't progress your character anymore because you shut it down. I mean, it goes back to the old improv adage of, yes, and you must have a relationship, some sort of relationship with your partner, and be able to develop that relationship or that group dynamic together.
Right. The simple construct of the game is that you have chosen to be with these 4 to 5 people. So creating a reasoning why I may not trust them, but I need them now. I need them to trust me now so I can get to my end goal later. I can't just burn every bridge that I come across and expect to get anywhere in life. Right.
So, Keythe, for when you're looking at, say, creating, when you were writing Bad Boy, for instance, if you're creating a character from scratch, what is your process for doing that? Do you have like a specific idea that leads to a character? Do you have a specific, event that happened in their life that leads to these sort of different story elements? But what are you doing when you're fleshing out who that character is?
We're almost always talking about what the character wants.
Mm-hmm.
What are they looking for from life? Is this someone who's always trying to make peace, who doesn't like the waters to be stirred at all? Or is it a chaotic element who just thrives on putting people off guard at all times? And then so when you are able to create characters with desires that conflict, that's when drama happens. I always talk about the unstoppable force meeting the immovable object, and that's where drama occurs. When you have a character that wants something that is completely beyond what they're going to get from somebody else. Game of Thrones did this really, 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 really well. It's in the early seasons in particular. So many scenes were set up where a character would just say, I've made a decision and it's going to be like this. And then someone else would come in and change their mind.
Mm.
So it's that unstoppable force meeting the immovable object. There's no one who can tell me that this is not going to happen. And someone goes, oh, have you ever thought about it this way? Oh, you're right. And that's where drama happens, when you think that there's no way in hell that this is going to change, and then it does. That's a really satisfying drama. And a lot of that in the world of tabletop role-playing games is your DM.
Right.
That the DM should know, like, okay, who are my campaigners, and what sort of obstacles can I put in their way that are going to test them, that are going to test their resolve, that are going to help them understand more about themselves. So the storyteller is sort of out above the world of the characters. I mean, in a play or in a movie or in a TV show, the author is the one who dictates moving the characters around on the board, if you will.
Right.
And to make that interesting, you want two people who want things to conflict. In Bat Boy, again, to use that example, the only thing Bat Boy wants is to be a normal boy. Problem is, he's got fangs and sharp teeth and a bald head, and the society is never going to accept him no matter how hard he tries. So you put those things together, but we want to know what happens next.
Right.
Will he succeed? So the more you can build that in, I think that's what is so exciting about tabletop and role-playing games, is taking the characters that you're dealt and putting them in situations where you can reveal them, even if perhaps the player doesn't see it.
Yeah.
Right. It's definitely that like old Disney want versus need, sort of like that very baseline, like let's give them the I want song in the beginning, and then at the end it's like you figure out what the character needs, sort of thing. Like that's kind of where I approach building my characters, actually. Is like I have to make it very simple for myself so I don't get drugged down into like the miasma of all the choice, because again, Lindsay, you said you can make so many choices. It's your character, like you have the freedom. And I feel like a lot of the times that's your largest stumbling block when it comes to making a character for yourself. It's like you have like unlimited amount of choices to make. So like how can you just narrow that down to something simplistic that you can actually have a nice handle on it? And then like even though your character might be simple, it can actually build into something incredibly complex and interesting over the course of the game. And because like God's willing, you're going to make it past level 1.
I know. Unless it's Adventures in Middle Earth, and then you don't. But Hunter, what are in some of your experiences that you've had in playing, and then also as performing, kind of what to building off of what Keythe was talking about, the importance of the relationships, and then hitting that wall and so to speak.
Oh yes, the immovable force wall. Well, conflict is always the best of both worlds. It's always going to set you up, and whether that's internal conflict, whether you set up a backstory where that my father was one way, my mother was this way, and they've scattered apart, and I had to choose, or I never could choose. There was a game that I was playing where my father was a orc chieftain who had built his entire tribal structure on war and on combat, and my mother was a human who was given to him as a peace offering, and he married her and then created a feudal system with her. Only she was anti-violence and came from a religion that only respected pacifism. And so it's like, I don't have to go to that length, but as a now half orc that is born between two worlds and is set with the task of now trying to spread orc generosity and love in a world that hates orcs, I have a mission as a side of both sides to follow that goal, but my inner nature is combative. My inner nature is warlike. And how do I wrestle with that in my own situation? Now, do I need to talk about that to my clan or my group? No. But if it bubbles up in a moment where I just say that, or my character, Tomas, hangs his head, struggles, and then finds up with fire in his eyes, beats his chest, and rages into battle with tears streaking down his face. It's like they go, okay, this means something to him, and they'll fight harder with me, or they'll back off and be like, give him some space. But as far as relationship shifting, as far as playing the darker side of characters or choosing that tougher path that is the less heroic option, the path that maybe a lot of people are enticed by but not fully cognizant of what that is. If you take a hitman and say that all of his marks are like sick puppies, who are infected and will only infect other puppies if they are allowed to continue. That's a horrible thing that you have to go out and do, but it's the job that needs to be done.
Mhm.
And so does each death matter? Yes. But it matters a lot smaller than it would to, your general everyday veterinarian or your general everyday person. And the way in which you can change the scale of how much does something affect you is your relationship boundary shift. But it has to cost something every time. If you remove that cost, that vulnerability, then you deaden the character. You flatten it. Take all the joy and all the stakes out of it.
Right. Hunter, you mentioned something that that I come across sometimes with DMs and players both, where they come into conflict with show don't tell, where the character just at the very beginning, especially at the very beginning, really, really, really wants to just tell their entire backstory and be like, this is my religion and this is where I come from and my mom and my dad were like this and I'm like that and I live in this place. All right, let's go on our adventure. So
it's tough to want to engage the party and to share what you've worked on, what you've created, but that's not what we're here for. You are in a tavern to get a mission to go on and take care of something. And people may ask you, what's your story? They don't want to know your story. They want to be like, who are you? And can I trust you? That's what this moment is. Once we've exceeded past that next step, if we have a moment in between after a battle, after we've earned a moment, now I ask you,
Right.
why are you doing this? Now that is an earned moment. And so setting yourself up to have your party be curious about you is way more fun and entertaining than being like, is it my turn?
Well, that's how humans are in real life.
Soapbox.
Yeah, it's like, well, if you meet someone, you're like, oh, hey, who are you? Where are you from? Oh, yeah, I'm Lindsay. I'm from LA. I'm not going to give you, well, unless you're my mom, I'm not going to give you my story the first time I meet you. Seriously, though, my mom does that. It's fine. It's okay. But it's like, Keythe, when we're talking about like, story structure here, granted, like, D&D, the story is coming out as you're playing. There's still going to be an arc and everything. But it's like, yeah, you don't want to just blurt everything out at the beginning because then you lose that drama. You lose maybe some of that tension. It's like, maybe there's some antagonism between these two characters. Well, why is that? Well, maybe it's because like Hunter with your half orc, there's some deep-seated, trauma that he is struggling with internally. But if we tell you all that at the beginning, the story doesn't have anywhere to grow.
And it makes it less earned. Like seeing a friend in pain, seeing someone in pain and doing like great things, it sparks the curiosity both in the audience as well as the player, the performer, etc. And you don't have to belittle the experience by just sharing it willy-nilly.
Right.
But yeah.
I love Hunter's description of the character, and that he knows that mom was a pacifist and dad was a raging orc, and you put those two things together in a character. Like you said, when we meet somebody, we don't espouse like our history. Well, my mom was a pacifist and my dad was an orc, but in battle we see that orc side come out, and then perhaps afterwards there's a moment of regret for how much you let that rage take over. Yeah. And that's a lot more fun to play than let me tell you what my mom and dad are like. Again, there's that conflicting within the character, which is fantastic, that I can't help myself, but I'm trying to hold back, which is similar to Thane when I played Thane in Mass Effect, except that he's compartmentalized it semi-successfully. And when you throw that twist of, oh, my son is now following in my footsteps and I don't want him to, you discover the torture that Thane is going through. When you see someone who thinks they've got it all together, and then you throw that chaos element of, well, your son's going to follow in your footsteps. No. Why?
Right.
Because I haven't successfully really, I can talk a good game, but when it comes down to it, and that's why I think that character is so moving, is that he is so conflicted and comes off as like, I'm just a gun. Do you blame the gun? I'm not the person who's pulling the trigger. Oh, well, then your son wants to be a gun. Oh, no. No, that can't happen. We must stop him. But I thought you said he's just a gun. And then you go deeper.
Yeah. Well, and that's a good point.
I do it.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a good point, Keith, in that, you're also, like, you don't have to freak out and think, oh my God, I have to create everything all at the beginning. I need everything figured out. It's like, no, your character is going to discover things along the way. They're going to discover things about themselves. They're going to discover things about each other. So it's like, you don't necessarily have to be overwhelmed to feel like you figure everything out at the beginning. Allow yourself those moments of discovery. And like you said at the very beginning, Keith, like, let yourself change your mind sometimes, because it might happen. The chat would love to know from both of you, is there a particular character, either in tabletop gaming or elsewhere, is there a particular character that stuck with you, either for sentimental reasons or because it was just so darn fun to play?
Go for it, Keith.
I have to say Thane was really special because it was so conflicted and so well written and so well thought out. If I go to like larger literature, I mean, I think, you go to Shakespeare instantly. I mean, I go to Hamlet, in a heartbeat. We just recently looked at Macbeth again too.
Yes.
So great. The Cost of Ambition, The Cost of War. Although I haven't seen a great Lady Macbeth yet. In the two different productions we watched, neither one of the Lady Macbeths really did it for me. So anyway, that's beside the point. But yeah, Hamlet's a great character because that same thing is like visited by a ghost that tells you to kill your uncle. It's like, did I see that? Did I not see that? Can I really follow through with this or can I not? And Hamlet, through the course of that play, ultimately comes to sort of a cosmic realization about the nature of all things, about the cycle of life through death to life. If the certain providence in the fall of a sparrow, that speech is so epically beautiful, but it all comes out of his pondering the great mysteries of life and death, coming across Horatio, in the graveyard right before that great speech, and all the way back, everything in there is about life and death. And that really is what we're playing with and playing out in literature and drama and movies and TV and tabletop games, is how do we survive? How do we stay alive? And how do we do that in the given circumstances?
Right. What about you, Hunter? Either tabletop game or tabletop character or in general?
Well, to talk classic, I would love to say Iago, because for me, I've always loved villains for villains' sake and for being so far from me and wanting to engage in being such a horrible person. But when I worked on a bit of Iago and Othello, I took it from like him being this conniving servant and this very low and like just feeding disgustingness into Othello. But when my teacher came at me, she's like, no, treat it like he's a fellow soldier. Like you slugged it out on the front lines with him, and this is your best friend betraying you. And it was all of a sudden so much more deeply insidious and heartfelt and everything else. And that level of honoring the villain as a man first who's doing horrible things versus being just an evil person was a huge change in my perception of playing that kind of character. But I will always love the Joker for malevolently and joyful goodness.
Yeah, that's kind of like, if we're going classics, I mean, your Joker is spot on, but if we're going classics, like for me, Margaret in Henry VI will always have like, she's got my heart. I mean, talk about a woman who's daunted by more tragedy and insanity, and yet she's still leading these warriors. But then, like later on, she's carrying her dead husband's head around with her. So,
I mean, no big thing.
War does really mess up things.
War messes up. But yeah, Hunter, you mentioned Joker. and for those of you who haven't seen, please check out Hunter's performance. And your makeup alone is just like, oh my God. So for that though, because, and this is a good question, Keythe, you can also talk to this as well. When you are given, say an existing character, an iconic character, and you are coming in to portray that character, obviously, you've got elements laid out to you, but then, the whole concept of making it your own, so for Hunter, for you, what was it about Joker 1 that spoke to you? But then also, like, how did you kind of make it your Joker?
Well, I started playing Joker on like stage stunt shows and doing a very loud, larger than life, like you need to be able to see this from the back row kind of Joker. The first time that we took it to film, it was about domestic violence and about the not hashtag relationship goals relationship hashtag. So it became much more about humanizing him and making him just a sweet, charming son of a bitch. The next time that I did Joker was Return of Jason and Todd. So it was beating down Robin, and they made me like my face was just melting. And I was like, okay, I'm going to need a moment because this is different than what I've done before. And so that time was just, again, in each of those situations, it was a power figure dominating a inferior and a helpless other person. So when people talk about, did you have to go to a really dark place? It was like, nah, this was playland. I was beating a piñata and I was, seducing a beautiful woman. Like, there's no negativity in this. It's just my enjoyment of controlling them in that moment.
Right.
And so when I got the chance to do Batman Beyond, the adaptation, the director was very adamant. He's like, I want this to be almost a shot-for-shot remake. And I was like, okay. And he's like, it's the same script. I was like, okay. And so I knew where the expectation would be. So I wanted to really allow my Hamill nature voice to come out and then to take on more of the cartoonish structures and pops, but then have the fun to layer in a little bit of myself with it, because the lines are going to be blurred one way or the other. And so if you can choose moments to highlight the tone that people are seeking, or the tone that the film is striving for, the project is striving for, then that's my goal. But still coloring in all the lines as crazy and dirty as possible.
Yeah. What about you, Keythe? I mean, you obviously direct and also have taught. What are your thoughts for, stepping into the shoes of an existing character, an iconic character, but then, finding those elements that make it your own?
I love what Hunter said about believing that what you're doing is the right thing. I think, again, it comes back to, what do you want? You know what I mean? I love the Chris Nolan Joker for the opposite reason, because he really didn't want anything. And that was what made him so impossible to figure out. Once they realized that he is just a pure chaos element, that he doesn't want anything. He doesn't want money. He's going to set piles of it on fire. He doesn't want power. He just wants to watch things fall apart. Mm-hmm. But that's still a desire. That's still a desire, and that's what drives him. But for most villains, the key is to kind of believe that you're right. You can't see yourself as a villain. You have to believe that what you're doing is, for whatever reason you decide, the right thing to do.
Right. The villain is just the hero of his own story. It's like the typical tagline.
Right. Yeah. We say it because it's true.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you judge yourself for a moment, you're just going to be playing at whatever you're doing. If you don't honor it for the worst villain to play is just a shitty person. Like, no one wants to be a shitty person.
No.
Well, and that's one of the, in taking villains and kind of, we can expand it even further. It's like, well, if you're either you create this character or it's a character you're stepping into, it's, someone, when you just look at that character, you're like, God, this is just a horrible human being. I did a production of Yellow, and I played this fundamental fundamentalist Pentecostal woman who spent the entire show beating and berating her gay son because, you know, it went against, and I like when I, and this was a play. So of course you're doing this character multiple days a week for months on end. And, you know, the first, you know, in meeting with the director, it's like, okay, well, you got to find a way to connect to this character. You don't think you're a shitty person, but it's how do you find the humanity within this person, this character, and understand why they're doing the horrible things that they're doing because they don't think they're horrible things. And, you know, you as performers, you as players, when you are given these characters that you're just like, oh, that is so not something I would ever do. How do you, you know, how do you come to grips with that and still be able to portray those characters authentically and in, you know, as complete characters and not passing judgment on them, so to speak?
Well, I mean, you know, it may be absurdly reductive to say, well, it's a game, right? It's a play, right? So we understand, like, I think actors have to have this. You got to be able to sort of compartmentalize. You got to be able to say, like, to know when you're crossing. We used to do an exercise in acting class where they would put a line on the floor. Mm-hmm. And when you're on one side of the line, you're Keythe. And when you cross that line, you're in Playland. And that just sort of helps you understand. Like when you sit down around a table with a set of dice and a mini, you're in Playland. So play, have fun, play. That's what it's for. To your previous comment, I played O'Brien in 1984. And for those who don't know that, that's kind of the guy that comes in at the end and tortures the main character into submission. And we had a really hard time trying to stage it until we came upon this idea that it was like the audience was like in an operating theater, and that I was sort of coming on to demonstrate how we take someone and make them into a model citizen. Mm. And that idea really resonated with me, and people come up to me after the show and say, oh my God, you're horrible. And I would say, what do you mean?
Thank you.
You're horrible. He's horrible. He's the one that's jeopardizing society. We've got to turn him around and make him right. Now, that's not the way the audience sees, nor should they. Although there may have been one or two who were rooting for me. I don't know. Just saying. But having that idea that when I was playing that character, everything I was doing, what did I want? I want him to be a model citizen. I want him to confess. I want him to become whole in my version of wholeness. So the more he resists, the more there's something to play. And once he finally gives over, then the celebration that you can have in that moment is earned. Right. Because the resistance, again, unstoppable force meets immovable object. You got to think that he's never going to give in, and it's my job to get him to give in. So those things hit and clash until one person or the other is defeated.
Right. That's incredibly interesting because you're not only just playing with like decisions and like just saying that, you know, my character feels they're right because they need this to happen, but you're also playing with worldviews as well. And like nowadays, that plays into a lot of what people do and how they act, you know, on the regular these days as well. So it's like, how do you go into like, I mean, you can go into the D&D world with that sort of motivation of like, this is my worldview, because you can come from, you know, a tribe or a monastery, or there's so many different, it is like Game of Thrones where there's so many different factions and belief systems and just magic systems that are completely separate. And then some of them even are just, you know, butt heads all the time, even like, especially like with the races and stuff. We had one character who was a half orc who really was not into having a Dwarven character on our, I mean, like, her as a person, obviously,
right.
but like her as the character was just like, that's always very interesting. Like when you can, and I think that's why people really like period piece dramas as well as like the fantasy period pieces like Game of Thrones, because there are those easily dividing lines in which the audience can like either be on like, you know, team you know, like team this or team that, or like I like these people because, you know, they're from you know, like I love the Dothraki because like I like horses, or, you know, whatever. Like people can choose a thing and really ingrain themselves into those worlds. So,
but I think it's also the great thing about that thing is that it's what we started this conversation by saying, is that those are shorthand backstories.
yes, yeah, no, it makes it really easy.
So you don't need, if you're a Dothraki, we know who you are.
Right, exactly. It makes
There's
it
a lot that goes into that, just like that. Someone else did all the backstory. You don't have to say like, oh, I was born in a hut on a rainy night, you know, to be able to play a Dothraki.
And
right, because like,
You know?
come on, you're Dothraki, you got this. Get in there.
I think you're go. All systems go on you, Dothraki.
But that's it. You have the context. You have the given circumstances of whatever the situation is,
Yes.
and like it, and how you choose your background on D&D. It gives you your whole blurb. And if that's too much for you to fill in years of backstory, one of the quick tricks they have is what's the moment that set that into being? What's the one thing about becoming a monk that you? Why did you decide to become a monk? Who made you see the light? What happened? What moment? What event? You take that one event that encapsulates your whole story. Instead of doing daydream upon daydream upon daydream, you have one thing that you hold on to. And then as far as we were talking earlier about how you really stretch those relationships to make a villain always heroic, you simply say, who am I doing this for? And
Right.
it can still be evil to other people if you're doing it for someone you love and they don't know about or care about. Because one person to you is worth the whole world.
So real quick, we've got about 10 minutes left, guys. So we are going to open up the raffle. So please enter raffle into the Discord chat. We are giving away the Mythic Odysseys of Theros Griffin Mini from WizKids. So enter raffle right now. We will announce the winner at the beginning of Realms of Bukador at 6:30. Chat wants to know, to both of you guys, what is the biggest challenge? What is the biggest challenges perhaps you faced when playing a character or when developing a character? Do you ever hit kind of those stumbling blocks, or those hurdles, or just something that's very difficult about, you know, diving into character or portraying that character or finding out who that character is?
I'll say again, if it's good writing, it's not that hard. If the writing is, if it's well written, if you can trust the writing, most characters are pretty clear. So you may have your own personal, you know, difficulties with playing the character, but really, if you just sort of give over to the play of it, if you really give over to what's on the page and the author has done the work for you, then you just get out of the way and let it rip.
Right. What about you, Hector? Yeah.
For gaming and for when you don't have a text necessarily to align to, the way in which I helped create opportunities for role play in the games is if I divvy up the relationships in the party, like who do I see as a rival, but like a fun rival that I can test myself against? Who is it that I am a little bit afraid of their power, and so I want to keep a little bit more of a berth around them? The way in which I see each one of them is, am I comfortable being in their space? If they're especially of a different race, if they're towering over me, do I like being in their shadow because that's a protective space if I'm a halfling to a Goliath? just keep defining the relationships more specifically, and you'll find that you care so much more about what's going on and who's doing it. So the deeper you go, the deeper you get.
Yeah, Robert McKee says true character is revealed under pressure.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's true in life as well. That when the shit hits the fan, you start to realize what people are really like, what they're really like.
In that vein, lean into your flaws. Don't steer away from them to always be heroic. You're given flaws on that for a reason, and that's where you'll really find what happens when your character's put to bear.
It's great advice.
Yeah, that's really, really fascinating. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, we've got just a couple minutes left. Do you guys, either of you guys, have any like kind of last thoughts or anything that you haven't mentioned that you want to mention?
Oh, how about let's take this time to plug. Let's plug your social media, please.
There we go. Yeah. Where can we find
you?
Well, you got yours written in. I was just going to type mine in here. I'm at Far O Near on Twitter.
Yeah.
That's me on Twitter. KeytheFarley.com, spelled just like that, with a .com at the end. If you want to learn a little bit more about me, hear my demos, take a look at my stuff, come over and well, you can't come over, but take classes with me.
Please don't come over.
I mean, I want you to come over. That's why I have these couches. I mean, that's what they're for.
And I spent many hours in that room.
For you to come and sit on and talk and laugh and play.
Get your tape measure and 6 feet. Just
I know, right?
Tape X.
Totally fine. Oh, Hunter Fights on Twitter, The Hunter C on Instagram, and huntercsmith.com. And if you check out Ready to Roll Game, we're going to be doing something very fun with some D&D tabletop and some live action swords and acting. So
and hopefully we'll be coming to you here soon.
We're getting it all set up.
We're getting it all together.
I'm always looking for a good tabletop game. What's anything out there that's? I mean, are we talking only D&D here? Is that the deal, or can we talk about
any tabletop gaming?
Because we've had a lot of fun with Camp Grizzly, which is a fun one developed by some folks in the Bay Area. It's sort of a Friday the 13th co-op role-playing game where you're at a summer camp and you're trying to escape a murderous bear who dresses up in a bear suit and comes after you with a knife. That's fun.
I love it.
It's really fun. It was developed by a guy at Pixar.
Oh, wow.
The artwork is a ton of fun. Camp Grizzly. Board game shop in Berkeley. Lindsay, I'm sure you know the big board game. You don't. The big board game shop in Berkeley. I can't think of the name of it.
Yes. Yeah, no, exactly. I'm totally blanking on the name right now, but yeah.
But we picked it up there. It was one of the staff recommends. So that one's a blast. Camp Grizzly, if you want to play like a 1980s Friday the 13th type game.
That's cool.
It's co-op or maybe not. Because that's the fun of it, is like if you like, the three of us can get out, but we're gonna have to leave the other two.
Sometimes, you gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, it's fun. A good one.
You're learning who your real friends are, huh?
Right?
It's just for the greater good. The greater good.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us. And as we mentioned, at 6:30, Realms of Ukador starts, and we will announce the raffle winner. Next week, we've got another amazing show for you right here at 5 o'clock. So Genevieve, we're going to be delving into proper weapon systems for LARPing. So we're going to have some fantastic guests for you for that. So for those of you who are into the LARPing world or looking into it, we're going to have some experts, weapons people on here to talk about how to carry those weapons,
What's proper? What is a proper and a good carrying system for your weapons? We're going to cover swords, knives, bows and arrows, all the stuff, all the things, so that you don't trip and fall on your face while trying to access your weapon when everything goes down. We will have some edge weapons experts here on the show, and they will be giving their knowledge to you guys, their real world knowledge to you guys, so that you can go off and play a really good game.
Great. Well, I think that's all we got for you guys. Thank you, Keythe and Hunter, again, so much for being on. We really appreciate it. And you guys had so much wisdom to impart. It was
amazing stuff today. I learned a lot, and hopefully everybody else did.
All right. We'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.